Try not to slow us down, Miles. Command says you're just here so they can tick a box. One of them sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. The others chuckled, certain the quiet analyst in their midst was a burden they'd been forced to drag along. Elara Myles said nothing, her expression unreadable, but her eyes missed nothing. 9 armed hostiles, no backup, no radio. They called her a liability, a quiet analyst meant to stay in the rear. But when the ambush hit, Elara Myles moved like a ghost through the chaos. Each step calculated, each strike lethal. By the time reinforcements arrived, the floor was littered with enemies, and every soldier who doubted her was frozen in silence, wondering who or what they had just been fighting beside. The dust hung thick in the air, turning the beam of sunlight slicing through the shattered roof into a golden haze. The crack of gunfire echoed in the distance, bouncing off concrete walls and disappearing into the labyrinth of the compound. Elara Myles moved through the wreckage like a shadow, silent, deliberate, every step calculated. Her sidearm never wavered, her eyes scanning for threats as if she had mapped this place in her mind long before setting foot inside. On the far side of the corridor, the rest of Falcon Team was pinned down. Captain Rafe Calder barked orders over the comms, trying to coordinate under fire, while Master Sergeant Jonah Brack's deep voice cut through the chaos, urging someone to flank. None of them had noticed the quiet analyst slip away from cover. By the time they did, she was gone, swallowed by the dust and smoke. Then just as suddenly as it had erupted, the gunfire began to fade. Shouts turned to silence. 12 hours earlier, the low thrum of helicopter rotors filled the pre-dawn air as Falcon Team gathered on the landing pad. The sky was still a deep indigo, the first hints of sunrise touching the horizon. Calder stood with his arms crossed, scanning the new arrival. Elara Myles stepped off the transport with the unhurried pace of someone accustomed to being underestimated. She wore standard fatigues the same as everyone else, but her loadout was conspicuously light. No rifle, no heavy gear, just a sidearm at her hip and a small pack slung over one shoulder. Jonah Brack leaned toward Calder, his voice pitched low but not low enough to hide his irritation. "Sir, you really putting an intel desk jockey in the middle of this op?" Before Calder could answer, Specialist Mason Cade, Falcon's wiry, sharp-tongued sniper, let out a laugh. "I'll give it 10 minutes before she asks for an evac. Maybe 5 if it's hot." Sergeant Talia Knox, the only woman on the team until now, adjusted the straps of her plate carrier and gave Mason a sharp look. "Careful, she might surprise you," Cade smirked. "Sure. And maybe the cafeteria starts serving lobster tails for lunch." Dean Mercer, the team's medic, was the only one who offered a genuine nod of greeting when Elara approached. "Corporal Mercer, you'll be riding in my sector. Don't worry, we'll keep you safe." She gave a small smile, almost imperceptible. "Appreciated." Calder began the mission briefing, outlining the plan to insert near a derelict hospital complex and secure any remaining intel. The analyst back at HQ had marked it low risk, but the captain's clipped tone suggested he didn't buy that assessment. When he pointed to the northwestern approach on the map, Elara's brow furrowed. She studied the satellite imagery projected on the portable screen. "That corridor has multiple elevated vantage points," she said evenly. "You'd be moving directly under potential sniper lines." The air grew still for a moment. Calder glanced at her like she had spoken out of turn in someone else's briefing. "We have our route." "We have. Stick to your role, Lieutenant." It was the unspoken rule of elite teams. Operators trusted operators. Support staff were there to watch, learn, and stay out of the way. From the outside, it might have looked like harmless banter, like the team was just blowing off steam by ribbing the newcomer. But in the special operations world, those first impressions stuck. Once labeled a liability, you carried that weight until you proved otherwise. And most desk people never got that chance. Yet something about Elara didn't quite fit the stereotype. Mercer noticed how her eyes moved, not just scanning, but cataloging. Every vehicle, every weapon, every person on the pad seemed to be mentally filed away. When she accepted her comms unit, her fingers ran through the frequency checks faster than some seasoned operators. If she felt the sting of their dismissal, she didn't show it. She stood quietly at the edge of the group, her posture relaxed but balanced, her weight evenly distributed. a stance Mercer recognized from the range, not from an office. Calder wrapped up the briefing. We lift in 30. Check gear. Once we land, keep tight formation. Myles, you stay in the rear. Don't get in the way. She nodded without protest. It was easy to underestimate her. That, Mercer thought, might be her greatest advantage. The sound of rotor blades thumped overhead, a steady rhythm that always seemed to tighten the air before an op. Inside the helicopter, Falcon team checked and rechecked their gear. Rafe Calder sat at the front, eyes locked on the mission tablet, while Jonah Brack ran a hand over the stock of his carbine like he was smoothing down a restless dog. Mason Cade leaned back, tapping a finger idly against the barrel of his sniper rifle. Talia Knox worked silently, pulling her gloves tight, while Dean Mercer secured the medical packs beside his seat. Elara Myles sat in the middle of the row, strapped in and motionless, her gaze steady on the floor. She looked almost like she didn't belong. Her kit was stripped down to essentials: sidearm, lightweight vest, a compact pack slung under her seat. No custom optics, no weapon mods, no backup rifle. If anyone was looking closely, they might have seen the faintest curve of a smile when she glanced up and caught the others noticing. In special operations, gear isn't just equipment, it's status. The thought came to her as clearly as if someone had whispered it. Every piece of custom hardware said something about the person carrying it, their specialty, their hours in the field, their reputation. In this world, gear was the unspoken rank you wore in the shadows. By that measure, Elara was walking in unranked. The vibrations of the flight triggered a memory she'd buried deep. A humid afternoon at a training compound far from here. Flashback, training compound. Years earlier, the sun had been brutal, baking the gravel in the yard to near-blistering heat. Elara stood in a loose circle of trainees, all in nondescript fatigues. She'd been the observer that day, officially present only to monitor communications drills. No one expected her to do more than take notes. When the mock ambush hit, the air filled with shouts and simulated gunfire from training rifles. A trainee stumbled near her, dropping his rifle as he pretended to be hit. Before she even thought about it, she scooped up the weapon in one fluid motion, pivoted, and fired 3 rounds, center mass on the cardboard silhouettes that had popped up at the edge of the range. Everything stopped for a beat. An instructor's eyes narrowed. He'd seen it. The way she'd shifted her weight before firing, the control in her breathing, the economy of movement. Not something you learn from a classroom. She felt the heat of his stare, then forced herself to relax, lowering the rifle with a deliberately awkward grip as if to say, beginner's luck. The moment passed, but she knew she'd almost revealed too much. Back in the present, the helicopter jolted slightly as it hit turbulence. Brack shot her a sidelong glance. First flight with us, Myles? She shook her head. First with Falcon, not first in the air. Cade smirked. Guess desk jobs get air miles now. Talia gave him another glare, but didn't speak. Calder's voice cut through the headset. Final approach. Review entry plan. The screen on the bulkhead flickered, displaying the satellite imagery of their target, the derelict hospital complex. Calder traced a finger along the northwestern perimeter. We'll insert here, sweep this wing first. The corridor gives us a straight line to the intel room. Elara's eyes narrowed. The angle of the shadows, the placement of broken walls, the height of the surrounding structures, all of it formed a pattern in her head. She leaned forward slightly. That corridor has multiple elevated vantage points. Anyone with a rifle could have us in sight for over 50 meters. Calder didn't look up. We're moving fast. They won't have time to react. The eastern service entrance is narrower, more cover, fewer sight lines. It takes 30 seconds longer, but Calder's tone sharpened. We have our route. The conversation ended there. Brack gave her a faint shake of his head, the universal operator sign for drop it. Cade didn't bother to hide his grin. The helicopter's nose dipped as they began their descent. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of dust and fuel through the open side door. Below, the hospital complex spread out like a broken skeleton, its courtyards choked with debris, its windows nothing but dark, watching holes. Dean Mercer glanced at her, noting how she was watching the ground. Not with the wide-eyed curiosity of a newcomer, but with the precise focus of someone already cataloging movement, terrain, and possible threats. The skids touched down, the bird rocking slightly under the weight shift as the team disembarked. Calder led them forward, boots crunching on scattered rubble. Elara fell into position at the rear, as ordered. She didn't mind. From the back, she could see everything. The hospital complex rose from the dust like a wounded giant, its concrete walls pitted and cracked from years of neglect. Windows were nothing but blackened holes. Stray wires dangled like exposed veins. Somewhere inside, a loose sheet of metal clanged rhythmically in the wind, a dull metallic heartbeat echoing through the courtyard. The air smelled of dry plaster and engine oil, undercut by something faintly antiseptic that seemed impossible after so many years. Sunlight spilled through gaps in the broken roof, illuminating floating motes of dust that drifted like slow snowflakes. Calder gave a quick series of hand signals, and the team moved in formation toward the northwestern entrance. Boots crunched on broken tile and shattered glass. There's a particular feeling when intel doesn't match reality, Elara thought as she scanned their approach. It's like a note played off-key. You might not notice it at first, but it nags at you until you can't hear anything else. The intel packet had promised an abandoned building, unsecured, cleared months ago. But the dust patterns on the floor told another story. Scuffs and compressed footprints that hadn't been there long. The corners smelled faintly of burnt powder, masked poorly by the tang of industrial cleaner. Dean Mercer, bringing up the rear with her, caught the change in her expression. "Something wrong?" he murmured. "Everything," she replied. Inside, the temperature dropped noticeably. The corridors branched like arteries, lit only by strips of failing emergency lighting. Shadows pooled in the corners, their edges shifting with the draft. The team moved methodically, sweeping room by room. Then Elara saw it. A small, matte black device tucked into the ceiling corner, no bigger than her fist. She'd seen it before. A broadband signal jammer, military grade, and new. Her posture shifted instantly. Shoulders squared, chin lowered slightly, eyes narrowing. The quiet observer faded, replaced by something sharper, predatory. "Wrong building," she said under her breath. Before Mercer could respond, the comms filled with static, a high, thin squeal that cut off mid-transmission. Calder's voice broke through for a second. "Multiple hostiles." And then nothing. The gunfire erupted like a thunderclap. The first shots came from above and ahead. Muzzle flashes bloomed in the dark like tiny explosions. My body moved before thought, dropping low, pivoting toward the sound, mapping angles. I counted 3 shooters by their firing cadence. Another 2 closing in fast from the left corridor. The sidearm was in my hand before I registered drawing it. My breath slowed, each inhale deliberate. 2 rounds. Shift. 1 round. Shift again. My world narrowed to sight picture and trigger press. A shout in Arabic echoed down the hall. The rhythm of the fight changed, sharper, coordinated. These weren't squatters or militia. They were trained. From the main hall, Brack's rifle barked in 3-round bursts. Knox called out a hostile position. Cade swore into his dead comms. Somewhere above, a single shot cracked. High caliber. Deliberate. The sound was wrong for the confined space. A sniper. Elara melted into the shadows near a collapsed doorway. She peered upward, tracking the faint reflection of glass in a distant window frame. The sniper's scope glinted for half a second. She didn't fire. Instead, she pulled a small mirror from her vest and angled it just enough to flash sunlight into the sniper's perch. It was bait, a brief, deliberate movement to draw his shot. The crack of his rifle came an instant later, punching a neat hole in the wall where her head would have been. She'd already moved, closing the distance along a blind flank. By the time he worked the bolt, she was in his shadow, wrenching the rifle aside and driving the butt of her pistol into his temple. He dropped without a sound. Back in the main corridor, Mercer was pinned down behind a half-collapsed wall. Bullets chewed the plaster inches from his head. Elara slid in beside him, calm as if they were on a firing range. 2 left, she murmured. How? Listen. The sound told her what the eye couldn't. The cadence of boots, the rasp of breath through cloth. One was moving too quickly, reckless. The other hung back, waiting for an opening. She lobbed a broken chunk of masonry down the hall. It clattered loudly, drawing fire from the aggressive one. The moment his muzzle flash bloomed, she stepped out, two controlled shots dropping him mid-stride. The second man tried to shift position. She let him, her angle already set. One round to the knee, one to the shoulder, and he was out of the fight. Within minutes, the hall fell eerily silent. The dust hung thicker now, stirred by the chaos, coating her lips with a taste like old copper. Calder's voice finally came back through in bursts of static. "Status!" Elara keyed her comm. "Clear." It wasn't bravado, just fact. She glanced toward the upper balcony where the sniper's rifle now lay abandoned. The shot he never got to take would have torn through Brack as he covered Knox's flank. No one down below would know that. Elara holstered her weapon and moved back into formation without a word. Mercer looked at her for a long moment. "Remind me again why they called you a liability." She didn't answer. The truth was easier to keep in the shadows. Gunfire still echoed through the corridors like distant thunder. But in Elara Myles's mind, the noise faded into measured beats, each one marking the next decision, the next move. Skill isn't just speed, she thought, slipping along the wall. It's removing every wasted motion until only the result remains. First kill. A shadow moved ahead, the faint scrape of a boot over debris betraying its owner. Elara didn't rush. She stepped into the open just far enough to be noticed, then ducked back. The man swung wide to flank her, predictable. She let him come, pivoting on one heel to meet him mid-step. Two shots, one to the hip, one to the chest. He collapsed before his rifle hit the floor. Second kill. Cade had taken position at a junction, firing toward a stairwell. He never saw the hostile creeping along the upper catwalk above him. Elara did. Without a sound, she scaled a half-broken scaffold, coming level with the target. One hand closed over his mouth. The other drove her combat knife under his rib cage. She lowered the body silently, Cade never even looking back. Third kill. A flash of movement in her peripheral vision. Brack, pinned behind a low wall, too focused on the enemy ahead to notice the one closing in from behind. Elara crossed the open ground in a blur, her sidearm still holstered. She seized the attacker's rifle, redirected the muzzle, and used his own momentum to drive him face first into the wall. His neck snapped on impact. Brack turned just in time to see her already walking away. Fourth kill. She entered a room lit only by the pale blue flicker of failing fluorescent tubes. A hostile crouched behind an overturned desk, waiting to ambush the first soldier through the door. Elara stepped inside and froze mid-stride, letting her shadow stretch ahead of her. The man lunged toward the shadow and into her waiting muzzle. Fifth kill. Knox was clearing a hallway when her boot caught on a tripwire. A crude but deadly setup. Elara lunged, yanking her back just as a grenade clattered to the floor from a ceiling-mounted trap. The hostile who had been watching for the explosion stepped from his cover, confused at the lack of detonation. Elara's round found the base of his skull before he understood what went wrong. Sixth kill. A short, sharp exchange of fire left Mercer hunkered over a wounded civilian informant they'd stumbled upon. An unexpected variable. Two enemies advanced in a coordinated push. Elara fired once at the lead man's foot, forcing him to stumble into his partner. She used that moment to close the gap, two clean shots ending them both. Seventh kill. A burst of rounds stitched the wall beside her. She dropped low, rolling into a storage alcove. The enemy advanced, expecting her to retreat further. Instead, she timed his approach by the sound of his breathing. As he stepped past the alcove, she rose behind him, a single blade stroke severing his carotid artery. Eighth kill. The corridor ahead was blocked by rubble, forcing her to move along an exposed balcony. Across the courtyard, a marksman sighted in. She ducked behind a pillar, unholstered her pistol, and used a shard of broken glass to reflect his position. Her shot traveled through a gap barely wider than a coin, dropping him instantly. Ninth kill, the moment. She rounded the final corner to find herself face to face with a man in desert camo, his rifle already raised. But instead of firing, his eyes widened. His stance faltered. "It's you," he muttered in accented English, voice shaking. Recognition. Not of an ally, but of something far worse. He said something in a language Mercer would later swear sounded more like fear than rage. Elara didn't let him finish. Her shot was precise, almost gentle, ending him before his finger could twitch on the trigger. The silence that followed was heavy. 9 bodies lay scattered across the compound, each felled by a different method, yet all with the same economy of motion. Falcon team regrouped, exchanging looks they couldn't quite put into words. They'd seen soldiers kill before. They'd never seen it done like this. Only Mercer noticed the flicker in Elara's eyes. Not pride, not even relief. Something closer to calculation. As if she were adding these kills to a tally that had been running for a very long time. And somewhere in that tally was the reason a man had recognized her and died afraid. The dust began to settle, carried in lazy swirls through the open corridors of the shattered hospital. The sharp scent of gunpowder hung in the air, mingled with the faint metallic tang of blood. Falcon team stood in the wreckage, the last echoes of gunfire fading into an unnatural quiet. 9 bodies lay across the compound, each in a different place, each dropped with surgical precision. Elara Myles stood near the far doorway, pistol still in hand, eyes sweeping the space not as a victor, but as someone searching for unfinished business. Her breathing was steady, the rhythm of someone who had fought within her limits, and never once crossed them. Captain Rafe Calder stared at her, his jaw set tight. Cade's usual smirk was gone. Knox rested a hand on her rifle, watching Elara like she wasn't sure whether to thank her or fear her. Mercer, standing a few paces away, kept replaying the last hour in his head, trying to reconcile the quiet analyst he'd seen on the helicopter with the phantom who'd dismantled a force of trained hostiles. Brack finally broke the silence. "What the hell are you?" Elara looked at him for a moment, then holstered her sidearm without answering. The room was sealed, its single table flanked by 2 armed guards who didn't bother hiding their watchful eyes. Falcon team sat on one side. On the other, Colonel Soren Vale, pressed uniform, cold precision in every movement, reviewed a thin dossier. Vale spoke without looking up. "Lieutenant Miles's actions today prevented the loss of this team. That's a fact." Calder's voice was sharp. "And the ambush, the jammers? Intel said this place was clear. We walked straight into it." Vale closed the folder, finally meeting his eyes. "The compound was a trap, Captain. Not for you. For her." She nodded toward Elara. A ripple went through the room. "You embedded her without telling us?" Brack's voice was low but edged with fury. "Need to know," Vale replied evenly. "Lieutenant Miles is part of a classified initiative, Chimera program. Deep cover operatives trained for infiltration, counterintelligence, and elimination of high-value threats. Her role here was as much guardian as analyst." Cade leaned forward. "Guardian? You mean babysitter? Because from where I was standing, we were the ones getting babysat." Vale ignored him. "Chimera assets operate under strict compartmentalization. That means even their assigned units aren't briefed on their full capabilities." Mercer frowned. "So you put her in with us, knowing the op could go sideways and just hope she'd keep us alive?" "She was the reason you walked out," Vale said flatly. "There's an unspoken truth in special operations. Command trusts you to do your job. And sometimes they trust someone else to make sure you can. It's not a pleasant thought, knowing there might be a shadow in your unit whose mission isn't yours. Operators live and die by trust, and dropping an unknown asset into the mix without warning is like tossing a live grenade into a briefing room. Even if it doesn't go off, everyone hears the ticking." Vale rose from her seat, collecting the dossier. "Lieutenant Miles will remain with Falcon team. Consider her your insurance policy." Calder's eyes hardened. "Insurance policies usually come with terms, Colonel." "So does survival," Vale said, and left without another word. The hallway outside was dim, the low hum of ventilation the only sound. Falcon team filed out, their usual easy banter absent. Brack waited until the others had moved ahead, then stepped in beside Elara. "Did you know we were walking into that?" His voice was quieter now, almost measured. She hesitated, her gaze meeting his for a heartbeat before sliding away. "I knew it wasn't as clear as they said." "And the guy who recognized you?" Her jaw tightened, the faintest shift in her shoulders betraying a flicker of something. Memory, maybe, or regret. That's not something I can tell you. Won't or can't. Elara's eyes softened for just a moment. Both. She looked as though she might say more. The weight of words balanced on the edge of her tongue. But then she exhaled, a controlled breath, and let the moment pass. You should get some rest, Brack. Tomorrow's going to be worse. He watched her walk away, the figure of a woman who moved like she belonged to two worlds, and wasn't fully at home in either. Somewhere deep down, Brack understood that whatever the Chimera program had made her into, it wasn't just a weapon, it was a secret, and secrets never come without a cost. The barracks were quiet except for the faint rasp of cloth over metal. Elara Myles sat alone at the corner table, methodically cleaning her sidearm. The overhead light cast a soft cone over her hands, each motion precise, almost ceremonial. From the far end of the room came low voices, her teammates thinking she couldn't hear. She's not just intel, that's for sure, Cade muttered. Knox replied, No, but I'm still not sure if she's one of us. Brack's voice was slower, deliberate. Doesn't matter, she kept us breathing. There was a pause, then Mercer. You ever think maybe that's the only reason she's here? Not for the mission, not for command, for us? Elara kept her head down, sliding the cleaned barrel back into place, the click echoing softly. She'd been assigned to countless teams over the years, always temporary, always with orders that overrode personal choice. But now, for the first time, there was no order telling her to stay. Vale's offer had been clear. She could transfer back into deep cover or remain with Falcon. No explanation, no pressure. She ran a fingertip along the cold metal of the slide, considering the weight of the decision. Falcon was loud, messy, unpredictable. They were also alive because she'd been there, and for reasons she couldn't fully articulate, that mattered. The next morning, the team gathered on the tarmac. A thin fog clung to the ground, curling around their boots. The helicopter's rotors were already spinning, the heavy air chopped into rhythmic bursts. Calder glanced up from the manifest when Elara approached with her gear. His expression was unreadable, but there was a subtle shift, a fractional nod that wasn't in the manual. Brack offered a quiet, good to have you as she passed. Knox gave the briefest of smiles. Even Cade's usual sarcasm softened into a grin that almost seemed respectful. They boarded without ceremony, sliding into their seats. As the bird lifted off, the downwash scattered the fog, revealing the base shrinking below them. Through the open side door, the horizon stretched in a wash of pale gold and steel blue. Elara's eyes locked on a thin, distant plume rising against the morning sky. Too straight, too dark to be natural. Her expression shifted, the warmth of the moment draining away, replaced by the cold, focused stillness her team hadn't yet learned to read. She leaned back into her seat, letting the hum of the rotors fill the space where words might have been. Whatever was out there, it wasn't in the mission brief, and she knew, in her bones, that the fight they just survived was nothing more than a rehearsal. The real battle hadn't even begun. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is carrying the heaviest load. Elara's story isn't just about covert operations. It's about judgment, trust, and the danger of underestimating someone because they don't fit your picture of capable. In our modern world, this lesson feels more relevant than ever. Maybe it's the colleague in the corner who never speaks up until they've solved the problem no one else could. Maybe it's the older neighbor you think is just slowing down, but who carries a lifetime of hard-earned skill and wisdom. Or maybe it's you, holding back more than people realize. We live in a culture that often rewards the loudest voice, the flashiest resume, the boldest self-promotion. But as we saw with Elara, skill and character aren't always loud. Sometimes they're deliberate. Sometimes they're invisible until the moment they're needed most. Now here's where I'd like to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated at work, in your community, even within your own family, and then had the chance to prove people wrong? Or have you ever realized you were the one doing the underestimating? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read them all, and I think your stories could help someone who's feeling overlooked right now. Thank you for spending your time with this story. If it resonated with you, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs a reminder. The quiet ones might just be the strongest among us. And remember, sometimes the most important battles aren't the ones fought out loud.